Hi, this is Andrea Bierman for Learning Bear, and today we're going to be talking about the wonderful world of plants. I want to talk about plants because I think they're really fascinating, and I've done a lot of reading about plants, and there's so many facets to plants that we are not even aware of. So I'm hoping to blow your mind a little bit with this video. So I have compiled a short list of 8 items to talk about that will hopefully blow your mind about plants. The first of which is probably the coolest one, and that is a clock garden. And it was invented by a famous botanist. His name was Carl Linnaeus, and he realized that flowers bloom at different times of the day. And so you could make a garden that would tell you what time it is. The only problem with this is it's very laborious because you're going to have to change out flowers somewhat often because, as we know, tulips don't bloom year-round, daffodils don't bloom year-round. So you would have to change them out periodically, which would be kind of laborious, but it could be fun, at least for a season, to either do it for yourself or to work with kids. So an example provided in the Weather Detective, which is a book, was that pumpkin and zucchini open at 5 a.m., marigolds open at 8, daisies at 9, ice plants at 12, dandelions close up around 2 or 3, gourds close up around 3, and then poppies close at 6. There's also a really interesting activity, and that, again, all the source information will be provided at the end, but there's this great website called kidsgardening.org, and they have it like 2 a.m. all the way down through the day until 9 p.m. So you can really make a humongous clock and discuss this concept with your kids, whether they're your own kids or students or your neighbors or whoever. It could be a really fun and interesting idea. Now, one of the items I mentioned was a common ice plant, and I'll be honest, I did not know what an ice plant was, so I had to do some research, and I found out what an ice plant is from Horticulture Unlimited. It's basically a ground cover plant, and they come in reds and pinks and purples. They're typically a summer-fall sort of plant. They don't need a lot of water, and they grow pretty fast, which is awesome. They kind of look like a form of a succulent to me, especially since they don't require a lot of water and they like sun. And succulents love those two things. They're very pretty, and the picture I've included here is from Horticulture Unlimited, so thank you for having a picture on your website, because I did not know what they were. The next thing we're going to talk about is the idea of black plants. So any light that the plant doesn't need is reflected in the leaves, and most often green is the one that is filtered out. Okay, that's what we see most generally. There are obviously exceptions to that, but usually the plant doesn't need green. Okay, so light, like when we turn on a light bulb, light is white. Okay, and all of the colors of the rainbow are represented in that white light. And basically the plant is taking all that light and they're saying, I don't need this green. And that's what's going out into the world. Okay, if they absorbed all of those colors, including green, then they would turn black, which I think is crazy and weird. I don't think that we would have such a fascination with having a good view out of our window or making our lawn look nice if it wasn't this vibrant, wonderful green. I think our perspective about things would change. It's really interesting. All right, so on to number 3. We're talking about smells. I want to talk about roses for a second. There's this romanticized idea about roses that, they're beautiful and they smell nice, and someone gives you a bouquet of them and you bury your nose in it to absorb that smell and kind of encode that memory in your brain forever. Unfortunately, that smell is not actually for us. Okay, we are not the target audience for that smell. The roses have that smell because they're trying to attract a certain kind of bug that likes that smell. Similar to a pawpaw tree, their blooms smell like carrion, and that attracts flies. So the target audience for pawpaws are bugs that like that smell, just like the roses, their target audience are bugs that like that smell. And, every flower smells a little bit differently because they're marketing to a certain bug, okay, or insect. It smells not actually for us. But there's this other amazing thing that they do. Plants send messages to each other, and specifically I'm talking about trees in this instance. If, say, there's a grove of trees and a giraffe starts eating the leaves on the tree sends a smell along to all the other trees like it in the area. Hey, there's a giraffe over here eating. You need to release your defense toxins to ward off these giraffes. And now, granted, it's not going to protect all of those trees in the country, but it is going to ward them off for a significant distance. And that is pretty incredible. It's kind of like animals marking their territory or trying to say, hey, I own this place, get out of here. Same sort of idea, and I think that's really fascinating. All right, moving on to number 4 this is all about not watering your plants. And stay with me here. There is a point to this, I promise. I think the original premise for this is to not overwater your plants outside, because you're a person with a life, right? You can't water your plants every single day and give them a good solid soaking. And that's okay. You shouldn't do that because you're going to coddle them, okay? And they're going to become reliant on you instead of using their own ways of getting water, which is stretching their roots down deeper. If you water them all the time, their roots are going to stay up towards the top of the surface of the soil, and they're not going to go deeper to find those richer minerals and all that water in the ground. So you don't want to water your plants every day. I sort of attribute this to my indoor plants also. I have 2 succulents and I have a rose bush, and I don't water them every day. And quite frankly, they're lucky if they get water once a week, partially because I forget, but partially because I'm gone a lot. I'm probably gone anywhere from 4 to 7 days every month usually. And they can't rely on me for water because I'm not home all the time. And I'm telling you what, I'm not traveling with my succulents everywhere when I go somewhere. So they have to learn to, and I use the word learn loosely, but they have to have some sort of survival mechanism. Okay, this is our dry period. We need to conserve our water and conserve our energy. And so yeah, don't water your plants all the time. You're coddling them, and you're not always going to be there to water them. All right. Next one is all about green spaces. Green spaces are basically any space that's green, essentially. Okay, you think about your lawns, your parks, your even those weird little pond things that are in the front of housing additions. Okay, they protect the climate, believe it or not, and among other things, they're great places for migratory birds to live on their treks, etc. But a small garden, if you think about your own garden, can pack away a significant amount of CO2 every year. The statistic that I have is that a garden of 11,000 square feet, which is a quarter of an acre, can pack away 1 ton of CO2. And this is equivalent to a journey of a car for over 4,000 miles or 15,000 miles by train. Your little garden is the little garden that could and does. Okay, it absorbs all that CO2, which is making for a better environment for us. Okay, that's incredible to me and amazing. And I'm thankful that we have a big yard because that contributes to that absorption of that CO2. And I hope that more places implement green spaces as this sort of information comes out, because it could really protect us and the species that we love as well. So next, number 6, we're going to talk about funky vegetables. We've all seen those carrots that are kind of strange shaped, or they have these weird appendages, or maybe they curl. Same thing with potatoes, any of those root veggies that are kind of strange, beets, etc. When that happens, it means that there's not enough oxygen in the soil. The soil is so compacted and hasn't been aerated enough, so the carrots are trying to find any way they can to grow down deeper. And sometimes, it's like a maze, okay? and that's why they're shaped like that. And somewhat of a fix for this is trees, specifically oak and fir trees. Oak and fir trees can overcome this problem and stretch their roots in the densest of soils, the least oxygenated soils, and can help fix this problem. Granted, this is a very slow fix because trees grow very slowly, but it is a fix all the same. Another, I don't know if it's a fix necessarily, but if you see tunnels being built in your yard, let it happen, because that means your soil is changing and becoming healthier, because the moles and all those little tunneling animals are fixing it for you. They're oxygenating that soil. So let it happen. You know what I'm saying? Try it. I know it's not the most appealing of ideas, but it could work. All right, so we're on to number 7, which is mast ears. And this one, you're going to have to stay with me a little bit here. So a mast ear is when trees produce way more of their fruit, whether it's an actual fruit, a cone, or a nut. They produce way more than they would any other year, okay? It's kind of like a high and low in a roller coaster. The mast years are when you're at the highest, and then their standards are kind of everywhere else. Somehow, the trees sense or understand that you don't want to throw out all of your seeds when there's a bunch of animals that are going to eat them, okay? For example, oak trees don't want to produce acorns when there's a whole bunch of wild boar to eat them. Somehow it works out that the boars don't have anything to eat, and so a lot of them die off because they don't have enough habitat, and that's when the trees will have a mast year, because there's not as many predators to eat their nuts. They need those nuts to be in the ground to make a tree, right? So, I mean, it all seems kind of common sense, but there's a lot of theory, I guess, involved in it. It kind of supports the idea that trees can think and have some sort of mental capacity to them, because they can sense, they can understand, they can learn. I'm going to be more successful when there aren't as many predators around. And, there isn't a central nervous system necessarily, like a brain with trees, but somehow they're able to collect information and understand what they need to do with it. And I think that's incredible. In addition to the idea of mast ears when they produce most of their fruit, this is a huge endeavor for trees, for plants, all of it. If a plant is going to produce a flower or a fruit or a nut or a cone, it takes an incredible amount of energy for them to do that. And I just saw recently where somebody said that zinnias, this certain kind of zinnia, you cut them down and they come back more and more. It takes an incredible amount of energy for those plants to do that. And, if those zinnias can do that, I guess that's great. They have some sort of store of energy, or they're being overwatered and fertilized or whatever. But trees have to calculate very carefully. Again, we're getting to that theoretical thing about them thinking, but they have to be strategic about when they throw out their nuts or their cones or their seeds, because it's critical for them to survive. And I think about like peach trees, they don't produce every year. They, it's like every other year or every 2 or 3 years. And again, those little trees, think about those little fruit trees. It's a lot of work to produce it. Thinking about as humans, we produce children, and the amount of effort it takes to produce a child and carry it through that entire process, it is a lot of effort and it's a lot of work, and the same sort of thing goes for trees. And I think that's fascinating to think about and kind of mind-blowing, and it also kind of makes you appreciate a little bit more of what's going on around you. You're a little more humble. I don't like to cut down my flowers anymore because I think, you know what, that was a lot of energy and it's not there for me. That flower is not, I appreciate it, but it's not there for me. That flower is there for the insects. So, I love to have flowers around, but I'd rather them stay living because it's serving a purpose out there in the wild. So just think about that the next time you go to cut down a flower or pick up acorns. It's a very weighty thing to do, to take that out of its habitat. All right, our last thing that I want to talk about is something that grows, and yet it's not a plant and it's not an animal. It's kind of its own thing. And this would be lichens and mushrooms. Lichens are those kind of furry looking things that you see on sticks or trees or rocks. They can be on shells. They're very ancient organisms, and some colonies are several thousand years old, and there's thousands and thousands of species, approximately 20,000 different lichen species. They're kind of a combination of fungi and algae. They're producers and they're consumers. They benefit from latching onto a rock or a tree, but they also kind of go through photosynthesis too. They're just, I don't know, they're just fascinating. I every time I see them on a tree, I just take a second look at them, and I just think that they're so interesting, and we really probably don't know very much about them, to be quite honest, and I think that's crazy. We know so much, and yet we know so little. And that's true about a lot of things. We don't know enough about the ocean. We don't know enough about dirt. And we certainly don't know enough about lichens, or my other favorite thing, which is mushrooms. And mushrooms are decomposers. They break things down. There's so much information about mushrooms. In a class I once took, the most profound thing that I took away from that class was when the instructor said, we could learn everything there is to know about mushrooms today, right now, in this moment, and tomorrow it will be outdated, because they're always finding out new information. They're finding new species. They're finding new ways that they travel. It's just fascinating and incredible to me to know that we know nothing. It's very humbling. All right, and that wraps up my list of 8 things that you probably didn't know about plants, and I really love about plants. I hope that your mind was blown at least once, and I hope this kind of connects you with your world, the world around you. Check out my other videos and subscribe to Learning Bear, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.